What's going on, man? Welcome back to the basement. I'm Ron, and today we have a dress rehearsal. We are a week away from the NFL draft, so I figured why not do a 3-round Dynasty Superflex rookie tight end premium mock draft here today. We have landing spots, and we have a special guest. We have JJ Zachariason at Late Round QB on Twitter. How are you doing here today, JJ?
Doing great, man. Doing great. I'm excited for, I'm sure you are too, for this draft to just kind of get here and be done so we can actually, draft with a little bit more knowledge than we currently are.
Yeah, exactly. Everything, it's kind of like the cards on the table at this point, everybody knows the players. It is really the landing spots where when we look at this rookie mock we're about to do here, we have Dane Brugler's mock draft. I'll make sure to link it somewhere in the description, the comment section down below. But it's interesting. We have like the chalk of like Caleb Williams, Jayden Daniels, Drake Maye, all going 1, 2, 3 to Chicago, Washington, New England. You have JJ McCarthy at 4, which is really interesting because he'll get Justin Jefferson. Marvin Harrison Jr., that's pretty much chalk. Malik Nabers, Rome Odunze in the top 10. Brock Bowers, Brian Thomas Jr. to the Buffalo Bills is interesting. You have a round 1 Michael Penix. Then you have like weird ones as well where you have – then it's going to be an interesting conversation when we get to that like early second round because then we have – your Jonathan Brooks to the Panthers. You have then Trey Benson to the Giants. You have Jaylen Wright to the Cowboys is a big one. You have Marshawn Lloyd to the Cardinals. So there's a lot going on here. I kind of just wanted to flash it on the screen for anybody, watching to kind of get a feel for what they're looking at here. Here's day 3. We'll talk through some round 4 through 7 guys if we get there in the 3rd round. But I will give you the floor here, JJ. You're on the clock at the 101. Which way are you going? Again, Superflex, tight end premium, rookie dynasty, pretty cookie cutter.
Yeah. I'm gonna go Caleb Williams with the 101. I can understand the allure of going with a Marvin Harrison Jr. But I did a study actually like less than a month ago on sort of how rookies appreciate in value from year 1 to year 2, especially when they're higher end rookie quarterbacks. And so when I did that study, I noticed that it's very rare for rookie quarterbacks, first year quarterbacks, to see their startup value decrease by a huge margin after their first year in the league. And I'm talking like even like Zach Wilson, Kenny Pickett, Justin Fields, who had a really bad rookie season. All those guys still were within a round of their startup ADP before their rookie season, which is crazy to think about because obviously a lot was not going in their favor during their rookie season. So I think Caleb Williams, even if he has a bad year, chances are he's still going to be a top 12-ish quarterback, from a value perspective. So, if you see signs that he's not, the second coming, as some people seem to think, you could at least flip them and have the value return, after that first year. I love Marvin Harrison Jr., love Malik Nabers, love Rome Odunze, love all these the high-end wide receivers, but I think Caleb Williams is a safer bet.
Yeah, I agree. And on top of that, with these, it's kind of tricky to think through, but he also gets Rome Odunze in this mock. So we have Rome Odunze, we have Keenan Allen, we have DJ Moore, you have Shane Waldron coming in. And yeah, I mean, like his worst case scenario is what happened to Trevor Lawrence in his first year, where he went from like a 1st round startup pick to like, I think he was still like a 3rd round guy after like a pretty terrible first year. So yeah, he's pretty much locked in. And someone else that I think is locked in, as this goes to me, with the evens here, JJ on the odds, we'll go Marvin Harrison Jr. There is something, it's like, there is something about Marvin Harrison Jr. where like when we talk about the safe floor of like a quarterback, someone who is the son of Hall of Fame Marvin Harrison, like if we're just talking like the market, I think the market will be very forgiving with Marvin Harrison Jr. And then to go along with that, he's also, an amazing prospect. I think that he's the only guy in like this Ohio State era of just like them pumping out all pro talents across the board that had 2 years of 1,000 or more receiving yards. I think it got a little bit flubbed with the COVID year for Olave Garrett Wilson, but still pretty crazy. He produced next to JSN and Emeka Egbuka. He'll be an NFL guy next year. He goes to Arizona. He'll be the wide receiver 1. He'll have Kyler Murray. There's really there is no overthinking it. He is like the prince who was promised. So I will flip it over to you for the 103.
Yeah, it's crazy. My prospect model likes Malik Nabers a little bit more than Marvin Harrison right now, but I would still be ranking Marvin Harrison ahead of Nabers because we've seen Harrison do it in multiple iterations, multiple offenses, different quarterbacks, all that good stuff. Nabers, you just have this like Nabers 2023 is the greatest wide receiver season of anyone in this class. Like it's one of the best wide receiver seasons you could possibly find when you're looking at things like yards per team pass attempt and adjusting that for, teammate competition, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to go with Malik Nabers here because I think that he is in that tier with Marvin Harrison. Like I think he's that good, that special. Some of his top comps for me were OBJ, DJ Moore, and Jamar Chase. So three guys who obviously have had good NFL careers. I feel like OBJ, for whatever reason, like people think that he wasn't or he isn't nearly as good or he's like overrated. Like the dude was unreal the first 4 or 5 years of his career. It was just like, a lot of injuries derailed what was going on with him. But yeah, like to me, Nabers, his top collegiate season in yards per route run, second best in this class, PFF grade last year, number 1 in the class, in the nation rather. He ranked top 10 in the class in best season yards after the catch per reception. We know that he can do a lot after the catch. And so I love Malik Nabers. I think he's a very, very special player. And these are, typically, in other classes, if you don't have the elite guys like we're talking about here, these are 99th percentile type players. In my model, in any iteration of my model that I've had, I would lean more quarterback because of the safety. You get, the 2-year look basically at those guys like I was talking about earlier. And I do think there's some attractive options there, but right now it's very difficult for me to not go the Nabers route, knowing that you could get a Jamar Chase like prospect out of him.
Yeah, and he actually goes. You mentioned the Odell Beckham comp. I had some rookie comps as well in my database, and it's just all the LSU receivers. He's like almost a cross between Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. He looks like Odell. Yep. Like it's amazing. He goes to the Giants, and I agree. Like injuries and like getting traded to the Browns, but like if you look at like rookie points per game in terms of fantasy, like nobody has ever touched what OBJ did in his first year. Which if you got that from Nabers, it would be a slam dunk pick. Now, you mentioned your prospect model. I did want to open the floor and just kind of ask you how it works. I know you have the rookie guide out right now. I get a copy of it every year. Kind of just tell the audience like what it is, because it's something that I want to sort of pick your brain on and mention it, but I don't want the audience to like not really know what it is. So how would you kind of describe how it works?
Yeah, so I have prospect models. I call it the ZAP model with wide receivers, running backs, and now tight ends too, but I didn't profile the tight ends in the guide. I just have running back and wide receiver profiles. It's everyone at the combine was profiled, so you get like 70 to 80 different profiles within the guide. I give you the ZAP score. I give you their height, weight, etc., some statistical comps. But what goes into the model at wide receiver, I can talk about specifically. You essentially get, I'd say the big inputs are looking at breakout score, which is a metric that I created this offseason that looks at yards per team pass attempt for these wide receivers. And it looks at the age in which they hit a lot of different thresholds. Now I was using breakout age before this offseason, which I don't think breakout age is like a horrible metric or anything like that. I just was getting a little bit irritated by it because number one, I think there are some flaws with dominator rating, with it. Like I don't find touchdowns to be nearly as important as other analysts do. And so, that's part of, the dominator rating calculation, and then dominator rating feeds into breakout age. And with breakout age, it's just really binary. Like you could get a guy who almost broke out, almost had whatever dominator threshold you're looking at, almost had that threshold, doesn't get it. And he's looked at the exact same way as a guy who had 3 catches, right? And so I just didn't really like the way that was set up. And I was using that in my model previously, and it gets some signal, but breakout score gets more signal when predicting the first 3 years, which is what the model does, predicts the first 3 years of a player's career. And so breakout score looks at yards per team pass attempt. I have a metric that I haven't talked about. It's in the guide and it's in the model, but it's fantasy point score, which is essentially the number of fantasy points a player has by looking at sort of the context of his team. So it's dividing it by the number of pass attempts that the team that he played on had. And then it's also weighted by program strength. That's the other thing I think is really important with these wide receivers in particular, is that before I wasn't doing enough adjusting with program strength. I was a little bit, but like a good example of this is like Malachi Corley, for instance, who I'm sure we'll maybe get to. I don't even know where he ended up. He went to New England in round 3 in the Brugler mock, but Corley is someone goes to a small program, right? It wasn't this Power 5 school, and his yards per team passing down numbers were okay. They weren't like massively elite, but they were okay. Like I'd say they were above average if you were to just look at a list of guys in their top season yards per team pass attempt. The problem though is that you're playing lesser competition, and so you should adjust that to some degree. And when you adjust his numbers, his breakout score ends up not even hitting the lowest of low thresholds that the breakout score wants these guys to hit. And so a lot of that has been an adjustment for me in thinking about this a little bit differently, that it's important for us to recognize that a guy playing at LSU like Malik Nabers is facing tougher competition. His team itself has better weapons around him. If Malik Nabers is playing for Western Kentucky or something, like or some, like Eastern Michigan or or Western Michigan, some random school, like he should dominate at that program, right? Like he should see crazy market share numbers. And this is actually what's kind of interesting about this is that I liked Jayden Reed last year quite a bit coming out. And, back pat, I got plenty of stuff wrong too. But, I like Jayden Reed coming out. And, looking at this stuff though, this is adjusting like per season that these guys have, right? So Jayden Reed started at Western Michigan, and he had a really good breakout age, right? Because he produced right away as a freshman there. But then he transfers to Michigan State, has to take a year off because of transfer rules back then, and then plays 3 years at Michigan State. And as he's coming out, people might be like, oh my God, this guy has an 18.7 breakout age. And then he goes to Michigan State and he's just, he's playing in the Big Ten. And it's like, well, the breakout age didn't happen there, but it's really easy for a formula and for models to sort of look at things that way. And I needed to sort of dissect that and remove that noise. So Jayden Reed still looks okay in the model because it likes versatility as well. Rushing yards is actually one of the inputs as well. Teammate score.
I love that.
Is
I love
another
like
input.
I always talk about like dynamic players where they can like kick return, rushing, all of that. I like the strength of teammates as well, or the strength of just the program, because I think we've all been burned on guys like Andy Isabella. Like that's probably the big one that sticks out to me.
Yeah.
And then what else is kind of in there?
Yeah, so draft capital's in there, of course. It's the biggest piece of the model, which I'm cool with. Like people like get angry.
They love to scoff at that.
Yeah, and I'm like, guys, my goal isn't to like predict where these guys go in drafts. My goal is to win fantasy football and to help you guys win fantasy football, right? And so like if I'm using this is a really, really important input. I'm going to use that input because I'm trying to win at the end of the day. So draft capital is one of the inputs for sure. And it gets the most weight in the model of all the metrics. But and then teammate score, like I said, teammate score is looking at guys in the, and I sort of adjusted this this season, but it looks at guys who were on a player's team in the current season, right? So like Rome Odunze with the other Washington wide receivers, but then it will also look at what happened the previous season. The only the one blind spot I will say about teammate score is that it doesn't calculate for an underclassman on that player's team who hasn't come out yet. It might be like a star, right? And I just know it's a blind spot. Like I know that and I'm not going to manually adjust anything because I think that that's just too subjective. For the model is not there for me to like only draft off of. It's there as a guide more than for me to make sure I'm not missing anything, very obvious and important. And making sure that I'm sort of like staying in the middle and just being logical, being rational with my choices and stuff. So that's definitely a blind spot though, is that whenever you get an underclassman who hasn't come out yet, because teammate score uses draft capital to sort of say this guy is good, right? And so like if let's just say Rome Odunze, for instance, with Jalen McMillan and Ja'Lynn Polk, let's say those two guys go like pick 250 or something, like they just go at the end of the draft, right? Like his teammate score will suffer as a result of that. But if they go in the top 100, then all of a sudden his teammate score is going to look a little bit better as a result of that. So there's just a lot of different inputs, but I do think at the end of the day, less is more oftentimes with this stuff. Like you can overfit mathematically whenever you just kind of throw a lot of stuff at the wall and just kind of throw stuff into a model and get stronger correlation from that. But it was nice this year because every year whenever I'm testing, I know I'm rambling a little bit, but every year whenever I test this stuff, since I'm testing against players' first 3 years in the league, I will not be testing against guys who were drafted in 2023, for instance, because they haven't played the full 3 years in the league. So every year I'm adding the next class. So this year I added the 2021 class to the mix from more of a testing perspective because they now have played 3 years in the league and the model got stronger. So that was a good a good, a very feel good moment for me to see that happen.
Yeah, you do love to see that, and it's a good point. Like everybody who's doing the prospect model thing, I think some people are gonna, maybe they market it as like this like know all be all kind of thing, but I like that perspective of like we both know. Like I also have a prospect model, and it's just kind of knowing that yes, there's flaws with it, but it is just like your compass. It's not going to give you the answers. It's just going to direct you in the right direction. And just honestly, I imagine you probably feel the same way of just like inputting things and looking at it. You just by like doing it, you just get familiar with the class just in general.
Yeah, and I think that what it can really teach you is sort of like the way I approach scouting in general is like, okay, we're going to start here and this prospect is perfect. Now let's just kind of poke holes in his profile and see where those holes are and see how glaring those holes are, right? Like at the running back position, the model looks at a breakout score, which is based on total yards per team play. And then it also looks at best season prorated reception share. So the percentage of receptions a player had within his offense. And the receiving aspect of things, this goes back to you talking about the versatility. Like I love backs who catch passes, and I love wide receivers who do a lot like kick, punt, return, and do stuff on the ground. Doesn't mean they're going to do that in the NFL. It just means that their team use them with intent a certain way, and they're trying to get the ball in their hands, right? And so when a running back has a great reception share, let's say, it doesn't mean that he's going to be a great receiver in the NFL. It just means that, oh, there's some signal here that he might be talented because his team was trying to get him the rock. Whereas, if there is a guy who has a sub 5% best season reception share, I'm going to look at that and be like, oh, why is the model flagging this guy as a high risk profile? Oh, he has a really bad reception share. What's happened historically with players that sort of look like this? And then from there, I'm just kind of removing them from my consideration set, at least, in the first 2 rounds of a rookie draft.
Yeah, 100%. And you can find I just wanted to kind of set the stage here so that when we reference Zap scores and I have some questions for JJ with certain players, you guys know what's going on. You can find that all at, I believe, lateround.com. I get it every year. I think it's one of the best, resources to come into rookie drafts with. So I'm at the number 4 spot. And this is like maybe the hardest spot of the first round for me. Because looking at Daniels, looking at May, the curveball is JJ McCarthy with Justin Jefferson and Kevin O'Connell as well. I can't personally do it, but if somebody wanted to make the case for JJ McCarthy at 4, I think you really, really could. I'm going to go with kind of where I've been this entire season, but I will say, like, if this is how the draft actually goes, I would be trying to move back to like 6 or 7 from the 4 spot. But I'm going to take Drake Maye. He just, to me, I know it's the Patriots, and I know people, like, I could see if this ends up happening in real life, Drake Maye going to the Patriots, like we could see him just being like a 6th, 7th type of guy that you get in rookie drafts. People really sleep on him. I like him a lot. There is something as well where I know Belichick is gone, but like the Patriots, and this is coming from a Jets fan, so I hate to say this, but like as much people love to say the Patriots suck, the wide receiver room is like terrible, like why would you want a quarterback in this spot? Well, they brought in Gerard Mayo. They have a decent amount of draft capital. It's a winning organization that it's not dysfunctional to the point where they're like, the Browns of like 5 or 6 years ago. And even then we've seen guys like Burrow come in and change things. Like for May, what it really comes down to is I had a video yesterday. I think I rambled for like an hour long, just talking through all of the quarterbacks. To me, I really like May just as a guy that I think that he'll be good for fantasy. I think he had like over a 25% rushing market share in college. He's super young. His big time throw numbers as well is like, it's like a PFF metric that just, I don't know, tight window throws, deep throws that I guess the PFF nerds watch and they say, wow. He had a lot of those. He had the most since I started charting him in his final 2 seasons. He had like, I believe like 79. And then on top of that, UNC, so some of his numbers kind of lack. UNC had him drop back 44 times per game, which is like the most since Mahomes, I think, dropped back like 52 times at Texas Tech per game. So his efficiency metrics kind of suffered, but still his big time throw rate was over 8%, which is more than any quarterback of like the last 2 or 3 draft classes. So I'm pretty much all in. The arm is there. He's only 21 years old. He just has a lot to like. I think he's going to scramble a ton. I'm curious where you're at, because I did give the prospect model a peek. I know you don't have a quarterback prospect model, but yeah. I saw that you didn't have May as your QB2. So I'm sort of curious how you're weighing him, because I do understand from a fantasy perspective, there's definitely some more sexy options in terms of like Konami code upside and all of that.
Yeah, that's really what it comes down to with Jayden Daniels for me. That would be my next pick is Jayden Daniels after the May pick. And it's mostly, again, it's the rushing. I talked to Matt Waldman on my podcast about this a little bit, and trying to see where he saw Daniels, because to me, the quarterback stuff and prospecting quarterback, the reason I don't have a model is just because it's really freaking difficult. Like it's very difficult to nail down, not only like nail down which quarterbacks are going to be good, but then there's that additional layer of like, we know that rushing matters so much more in fantasy than it does in real life. And then, you have to add that layer on where you get maybe mobile quarterbacks who aren't that great of quarterbacks IRL. And then all of a sudden you're just kind of like weighing those options and figuring things out. But what Waldman told me, and this is, I think, echoed across the space. Daniels is not like a Lamar Jackson type dynamic runner, right? And that's important to get across, because I do think that people think, oh, mobile quarterback, I'm going to get this Lamar Jackson upside. If you watch Lamar Jackson when he was at Louisville, I mean, it's like out of control how athletic and how he moved, and he moved differently. Like Jayden Daniels is not afraid to take shots a lot of times. Yeah. Like a lot of times, like just ridiculously stupid ones. Lamar Jackson was always really, and still is really, really smart with his body when he's running. He's also just quicker and a little bit more agile. But I do think Jayden Daniels could be like a RG3 type, like someone who, and the guy that Waldman brought up was Marcus Mariota, which I understand people, like scoff at a little bit, but Marcus Mariota was so beyond putrid with Atlanta the last time we saw him, and he was still at times a fantasy option because of the rushing. Like we were still randomly streaming Mariota because we knew that he could find the end zone twice on the ground and maybe give you 50 yards on the ground as well. And so, with Jayden Daniels falling to Washington here, you get decent weapons around him. Hopefully Cliff Kingsbury can do something along the lines of what he was able to do to some degree with Kyler Murray, in Arizona. Which was fine from a fantasy perspective. So I'm going to lean Daniels there, but I can understand if someone would like, go like, because I do think in Drake Maye's range of outcomes is like a Josh Allen type career. Like I still think like that is because he's got that dog in him. Like he's gonna run the ball more than people probably think, and he's relentless when he does that. And so I can understand going that route, but I'm gonna go with Daniels here.
And this sounds kind of dumb too. I know, I don't know. I think from just seeing you on Twitter, I think you're definitely a little bit of a college basketball fan. Like I've said it a million times, but his brother's Luke May. And to me, that's at least a little bit of signal that he's maybe more Josh Allen than a Baker Mayfield, where his rushing won't translate, where he has like legitimate athletes in his family. And like, I think his dad played quarterback at UNC, where, that's kind of the fear, especially with him, because he didn't run at the combine, where he could go to the NFL and just like the rushing, it's like Baker or like Johnny Manziel was another one where he just wasn't the same athlete. I'm okay betting on the side that he is, but I agree with the Daniels sentiment that you had of like, there's a spectrum that I've sort of been talking about, and it's tough. It's kind of like the fork in the road we were at with Jalen Hurts a few years ago, where he had like a really good stretch, but it was like, is he going to be a long-term starter? Like, I'm very certain Jayden Daniels, we saw with Mariota, like you said, RG3 early on, even Fields had a top 5 point per game finish. So he's going to score points. It's just like a matter of like, is he going to get a second contract? But it's like, it's Dynasty. You can move off of him before that. Like there's going to be an offloading point with Jayden Daniels. So that's kind of the dichotomy of it.
For sure.
Now the 6th spot, this is another tough one. Like this is the way that this draft broke down. I think, and I don't even really like him if I'm being completely honest, but I think I just have to take JJ McCarthy. I think I do. Like you mentioned with your, rookies don't really lose a ton of value after their first year. I think JJ McCarthy will have some of that goodwill. And like, this is just a spot where he gets Kevin O'Connell, who has like, he was feeding plays into Josh Dobbs at times and like running an NFL offense. JJ McCarthy's so tough, man. He's never thrown for over 3,000 yards in a season in college, but like he doesn't make a ton of mistakes. I don't know how you feel about like pressure to sack rate data, but like in terms of pressure to sack rate, he's been great where he's not taking dumb sacks. He's also, his pressure to sack rate's low, but he's also, his time to throw is a little bit longer. So he kind of almost has that like Purdy had this, Kyler Murray had this in college, where he can extend plays and not take sacks, but it's also like, we're doing a lot of projecting here is what I'm trying to
Yeah.
say. You know, like we never, like he could be somebody where he comes in and he, like I could easily see him being Brock Purdy, where he's fine and like at his ceiling, he's like a, you know, QB 8 point per game on the season, QB 9 point per game, but like him ever being, you know, and when we're picking quarterbacks in the top 6 of a rookie draft, I want that upside, like greedy as it might be. But I'm curious, how are you treating JJ McCarthy? He, like, if I got to be honest, like this is the only scenario where if he goes to the Vikings, literally like 4th or 5th overall, it's tough for me to put him much lower just with how, you know, 9 of the top 12 startup picks right now are quarterbacks. I always say like quarterbacks kind of just rule everything in Dynasty. It's tough to put him much lower.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree. I think that you nailed it with the appreciation piece in year 1 to year 2. It's like, all right, JJ McCarthy goes to Minnesota. He'd probably have, like, if you were to project JJ McCarthy in Minnesota year 1 versus Drake Maye in New England year 1, I mean, JJ McCarthy might come out on top just for year 1, just from like a projection standpoint, right? Because of the weaponry and the system that we know, at least from a projection standpoint, because a lot of it going on in New England is we just don't know exactly how things are going to go down. Whereas we have a lot of data points with this like Sean McVay tree and what it can do with these quarterbacks. And so, yeah, I mean, I think McCarthy makes a ton of sense in Minnesota, number 1. Number 2, if he does go in the first round, my only fear, I think that where you got him here is where it's perfect. My only fear would be if someone decides to reach a little bit for him based on landing spot, if the market just doesn't value him just because of the pre-draft sort of perception of McCarthy, right? Like if the market is sitting there and like, even if you look at like keep trade cut right now, you know, McCarthy and Superflex is below the, like everyone else. And like, I think some people would probably consider him in a separate tier than a guy like Drake Maye and Jayden Daniels and such. But so I do think just from like a market value standpoint, that's the only fear with McCarthy if you were to have him leapfrog a guy like Maye in your rookie draft.
Yeah, I agree. I personally couldn't do it, but I think the crazy part is like right now that's where he's valued. But I do really think if this is how it happened on draft night, it really wouldn't shock me if JJ was going ahead of Maye in rookie draft. Like if we did like rookie draft ADP, it wouldn't shock me because people do love the landing spots. Like I said, there's some sort of stench around New England, even though they are like a pretty historic franchise.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's why it's so tough. I think if Maye goes to New England, I'm gonna like it because I think we're gonna get some discounts. But this actually pushes back, like, because early on in the draft season, I was saying like the top 7 picks are like the clear tier. But now that all this JJ McCarthy steamed happened, like there is to me a clear top 8. So
Yeah,
I'm curious what you do here at 7.
Yeah, you know, I think that you could go, because it's tight end premium, you could go Brock Bowers here pretty easily and it would be fine. I'm going to go with Odunze here though. And I'm doing that because I'm not one who usually in rookie drafts / startups will go pretty crazy with tight end. You know, I did a study last year and look, my tight end model loved last year's class. And I did this study, like understanding that a lot of guys from that class could increase in value, all that good stuff. But the way that tight ends appreciate from year 1 to year 2 is not nearly as great as the other positions because of the demand of the position, right? Like we very rarely, even Kyle Pitts at his peak, you know, he's not going to be valued the same way of a Jamar Chase at his peak or some wide receivers at their peak, right? And Travis Kelce at his peak and Rob Gronkowski at his peak, all that good stuff. The best tight ends in football are not viewed the same way as the best wide receivers in football. And the reason for that is because we need more wide receivers on our fantasy rosters. Even in a tight end premium league, the thing that changes most is that would change the value of tight end more is if you change the demand of the position, right? If you're starting 2 tight ends instead of 1 tight end, getting that extra half point per reception is not bad. Like it's definitely makes tight ends more attractive and valuable. But I do think that Rome Odunze, even though my model, you know, has a pretty clear tier drop from Nabers and Harrison to Odunze. And honestly, dude, I wouldn't be shocked depending on where Brian Thomas goes. Like if he went 7, like if we, you know, looking at at Brugler's landing spots, Odunze at 9 and Brian Thomas at 17, their ZAP scores would actually be pretty comparable. I would imagine once it's all said and done, because Thomas has a better breakout score than Odunze does. You know, he's an early declare, which gets a little bit of signal, not a ton of signal, but a very little amount of signal. You know, he has just as good of a teammate score or around the similar teammate score as Odunze. And so he would probably be liked at least very comparably to Odunze. But if you look at like top 10 wide receivers historically, you know, over the last like 12, 13 years. And you look at their hit rates and how well they've performed. I know that people are going to be, oh, but Corey Davis and Tavon Austin and blah, blah, blah. The hit rates are incredible among top 10 wide receivers when you give it context and you look at what happens in the teens and in the 20s. So I will likely have Rome Odunze in his own tier after Nabers and Marvin Harrison. And I know very smart people like Matt Harmon who think that they're all interchangeable, who think that, Daniel Jeremiah has Rome Odunze as the wide receiver 2 in this class. I mean, it's not that crazy of a take to even put him in that tier. So I'll go with Odunze because I think he is a pretty complete prospect.
Yeah, I'm in a similar boat where I'm kind of just trusting the film guys. I'm also kind of curious how you feel about this, because as we move into the future, I'm very tempted. Like right now, my prospect model the database goes back to 07. I almost want to push it up to 2015 and the PFF era.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you feel about this. I almost think we're in an age at this point. I would be shocked if we see another Kevin White, Tavon Austin level bust in the top 10. It just feels like teams are smarter now that they wouldn't, they at least have some nerd that's you simply can't take Kevin White 5th overall in the draft, I think in previous years, my model doesn't like it. It's fine with Odunze. It actually has Brian Thomas Jr. ahead. Of course, like we said, we don't just blindly follow it. But it's dinging him for the non-early declare. And I think in years past, I'm trying to grow here. I think in years past, I would have pointed to, your Kevin Whites and Corey Coleman's and these first-round wide receivers that weren't early declares that didn't hit. But we're now in the COVID age. We're now in a spot where I don't think we're going to really see, I think the Corey Davises, like you said, and the John Rosses. I don't know, almost being well, Rome Odunze is the next one. It almost feels like you're planning for something that I don't know is going to be as often as it used to be, if that makes sense.
No, it does. So I did a study too last week on early declare status. I wrote a newsletter and sent it out. And essentially what we're seeing in the NFL right now with early declares is we're seeing fewer early declares in general. When you look at the proportion of early declares divided by the number of guys who went to the combine. Now, that number over the last 2 years has been below 20%. So fewer than 20% of the wide receivers coming out this year are early declare wide receivers. Whereas in previous seasons from 2011 onward, you would see that up to 40%. It was a lot higher and a lot greater. Some of that has to do with COVID for sure, but a lot of it to me has to do with NIL and transfer rules. Because think about it from the perspective of a wide receiver that is contemplating going into the draft, right? They could either go into the draft and take a risk and say, maybe I'll go in the first round, maybe the late first round or something. If it's a fringe guy, we're not talking Malik Nabers or Marvin Harrison here. If it's a fringe guy, Rome Odunze last year probably would not be a first round pick. A lot of what he did happened his senior year. He blew up last season. And so Rome Odunze is sitting there. He's I could go back to school, try to improve my draft stock, or I could come out right now and risk not going in the first round. That's fine. That's one thing. But a lot of players also can now transfer and not have to sit out a year, which I think is massive, because before, if you had to, if you were contemplating I'm not going to get it done at this school for my final season at college if I came back as a senior, so I'm going to transfer. But if you transfer, you miss out on that year, and then all of a sudden things just start to spiral, right? It's a lot easier to go to the NFL whenever that's your alternative. But now players can just go to another school and just try to do something big at another school, another program that's a little more advantageous to them. And so as a result, what we're going to see, and what we're going to see this year, especially if you look at all the early declare wide receivers, they're all top 100 picks. I mean, they're all a lot of them are going to be gone probably before the 50th pick in the draft, right? Because the guys that are coming out because they know they're going to be drafted early, right? And so if draft capital is an input in your model and anyone's model, that's likely just going to capture early declare status at the end of the day, because the guys that are coming out are the ones that are going to get drafted early, right? And so I think that what we're going to see is sort of the death of the day 3 early declare. So Gabe Davis, Stephon Diggs, those guys are just not going to exist anymore unless someone just drops for whatever reason, whether off the field, what have you. So the thing with the early declare stuff is I think that's going to become more obsolete because of other factors that we're looking at. But then also, if you look at just something like breakout score, like the metric in my model, and you look at first round wide receivers since 2011 who were early declares and not early declares, but then you separate them by had a breakout score over 80, which is, yeah, arbitrary, but it's just a, you know, a number that says you had a pretty good breakout score despite the fact that you stayed in school for 4 years, and then below 80. Rome Odunze is a non-early declare with a breakout score of 86, so he's above 80. That group has a much, much better hit rate than early declares who had breakout scores below 80. So Adonai Mitchell, for instance, right? Early declare, but a really poor breakout score. His group, his subset, has a way worse hit rate, even during the era that we're talking about where, like, you know, early declare got a ton of signal and all that good stuff. His subgroup got a lot, or had a way worse hit rate than what Rome Odunze's subgroup did.
Yeah, and I think it's a good point. Like, early declare used to be like something that I thought was a huge signal, and I think it was. We just kind of got unlucky that NIL just happened, like you said, and then like COVID made things weird. Yeah. So like, like just last year, right? We saw Rashee Rice, Puka Nacua, like every single Zay Flowers, like every single good receiver wasn't your like typical early declare. And like you said, the early declares got drafted early for the most part. Now at the 8th spot, I will take somebody who broke out as a freshman. I'll take Brock Bowers here. He not only has like the argument for like best tight end prospect of all time, and maybe like the best college tight end of all time. Like his year one, I'm looking at it now. He had 56 catches, 882 yards, and 13 touchdowns in an offense with Jermaine Burton, Ladd McConkey, A.D. Mitchell, James Cook, Darnell Washington, George Pickens. Like, it is just absolutely insane. And you talk about wanting dynamism in receivers and running backs, and that's what I love about Brock Bowers. He had 19 carries for 193 yards and 5 touchdowns. Like, he is a running back. He is a tight end. He is whatever you need him to be. He goes to my Jets here, which I would be thrilled about. But like, I talked about this with Overzet when we did the rookie mock draft. Like, he actually thinks that the Jets are a great landing spot, and I agree. But God, it's fragile, man. We're like week 1, it's going to look really cool. But like, we have 2 33-year-old tackles. We have a quarterback who's like smoking crack in like dark rooms. Like look, I love the Jets. I'm hoping everything goes well. But I don't know that I could be like, oh, well, the Jets are a great landing spot. Like, I know that they need a tight end and a pass catcher. But yeah, just for positional scarcity. And like you said too, it's tough to ever see a tight end being like a first-round startup pick. And I think the only time where that could have happened is if we didn't just have that Laporta influx, and like, because tight end was looking rough for like a 2-year stretch where like like Andrews, once he gets past his prime, like once Kelsey's like dust, if you just had like one tight end that was better than the rest, and then also like under 25, I could see that scarcity kind of being there, but I don't really think that that's the case.
Yeah, I agree. My tight end model goes back to 2015, goes back to the PFF era, and with that, Kyle Pitts does look better than Bowers. Bowers is 2, but the main reason for that is we don't have testing numbers for Bowers. And like, unfortunately, you know, tight end athleticism, like, I have nothing athleticism wise in my wide receiver model, but I have like speed score gets a lot of signal for the tight end one, and we just don't have it for him. So I have to give him a generic number for that, and then that just lowers things a little bit.
Yep, and that's what I'm sure you saw. That's what Josh Norris was trying to say the other day,
right.
And then everyone came over the top and dunked on him, and he's right. Yeah. It's like yes, you can watch, he can hit the GPS times, but unless if you put him on the same scale as everyone else, there is no telling where he is on the spectrum of good to great tight ends. You know, and most of the great ones look like Gronk, where they're just absolute freaks. But I'll turn it over to you at pick number 9 here.
Yeah, I think this one's actually pretty easy because of the landing spot. I'm going to go Brian Thomas, who goes to Buffalo at 17. You know, like I said, Thomas is basically in the same, like from a model perspective, in a very similar tier as Rome Odunze. You know, I'm going to have Rome Odunze in a tier above him at the end of the day, but you know, he looks really strong. The one thing with Thomas, 2 things. Number one, we only saw last season from a production standpoint, right? Like we didn't see much more from Brian Thomas at LSU aside from last year. You could say that to some degree with Malik Nabers, but Nabers had a little more juice beforehand. And then the other piece to that is, I don't know if you had a rough time with this, but his statistical comps are just difficult to find. Like, there's just the matches and the percent match for Brian Thomas with the comps in my model are not very good. And his top one was Quentin Johnston. And I remember tweeting that and getting a lot of flack for it. But I've seen now, when, you know, a lot of evaluate, because like I get the prospect guide out at the beginning of March. And so like, I'm not really that influenced by what's going on around me because not a lot of like analysis is really happening at that point with the draft. And then a lot of these guys are like watching things at the end of March and into April and stuff. And I've seen some film evaluators say that, you know, he's like what we wanted Quentin Johnston to be, which, you know, I think is fair. Like it's a Martavis Bryant type archetype. And then you pair that with Josh Allen and that kind of offense. He could see not only a decent number of targets, you know, decent target share there, but also, you know, get those splash plays and be pretty efficient.
I'm actually pretty shocked that he comes out so well for you because his breakout score probably isn't great. And then also you don't factor in athleticism, which is like, you know, he has like a 9.83 RAS. So that's like, you could see if a model was doing athleticism, you could see it kind of picking him up, but him almost like being one of those like Rashad Perriman type traps. So do you think it's just like a monster year 3 along with his teammate score that's kind of propping him up and draft capital?
Yeah, so exactly. So with breakout score, the thing that I love about it too is that like in the past, I would have totally brushed off a profile like Xavier Legette's, for instance, where, you know, you get literally nothing for 4 years, but in that 5th year, he has a great season, yada, yada, yada. And I would say that historically, those kinds of wide receivers are pretty good ones to avoid, like just generally speaking. But I do think that the degree in which the player broke out still matters, right? Instead of just saying like, this was a breakout, this wasn't, look at how big of a breakout that really was. And if you look at Brian Thomas, prorated 2.86 yards per team pass attempt rate last year, and then he actually gets a little bit of a bump because of the program strength too. And so that number with the bump is actually looks like a 3.15 yards per team pass attempt rate. And then you equate that to breakout score, and it's like, oh, his junior season, you know, at however 21 years old or however old, you know, he has this 3.15 yards per team pass attempt rate. That's a breakout score that's well into the 90s because it was just that strong of a season. And then on top of that, you get the teammate score, you get these other factors that, you know, draft capital, obviously, these other things that do favor him. And so the model really likes him as a result.
Yeah. And for comps, my comps process could definitely use some work, but like one that popped up for him is like another one that's not all that sexy is like Devontae Parker.
Yeah.
But the thing that's good about him, that was like scary about Quentin Johnston is he had I think like 34% of his career targets were contested, so he's not getting open.
Right.
Brian Thomas Jr. is at like 20%. 20% is kind of like that threshold people don't like because but it's not terrible. Like Drake London kind of hangs out in there. Marvin Harrison Jr. hangs out in there. And the thing that really surprised me, because like you hear, like you said, like those Martavis Bryant, like field stretcher, and like sure that's in his bag, but it seems like he can also do comebacks really well. I think Matt Harmon wrote about that. 12.2 ADOT to me at least gives him a ceiling of like being able to command targets at a high level, right? Because like, yes, he's gonna have the higher ADOT and that's great, but ideally you want like a true X that's like around the line of scrimmage. So 12.2 ADOT's great. 5.3 yards to the catch per reception is pretty good. And then he also had over a 20% missed tackles forced per reception in college, which tells me at least like he's not just I'm trying to think of like I guess Martavis Bryant would be decent, but you know, he's not Alec Pierce is what I'm trying to say. Like there's more, you know, there's more he can work with.
Like Terrace Marshall was another comp for me, which I don't think he is, but it's again just like that archetype. Torrey Smith was the other one that's kind of like a reasonable one, right? Like again, it's another comp where I throw it out there. People are like, oh, Torrey Smith was great. Like he had a great career. Yeah. It's not, you know, I don't think that we like want that per se out of a, you know, mid first round pick who's getting hyped and is in a good landing spot or anything like that. But like at the end of the day, if Brian Thomas is a Torrey Smith career, we're not going to look back and be like, that was such a horrific mid first round pick. You know, it was fine. But I do think his ceiling is a lot higher than that. Yeah,
exactly. And in this mock, he gets Josh Allen. So the next one I'm going to go with is really just another landing spot. It would actually be curious because Brian Thomas going to the Bills, such a sexy landing spot. This might just happen organically. Because if AD Mitchell goes to the Chiefs, I'd expect to get priced out of him if I'm being honest. But the way that this mock went, where Xavier Worthy didn't get first round draft capital, none of the receivers really snuck into the first round. I think that like I want to say the over under for first round receivers is somewhere like 6.5. I think that this only had like 5. So we get AD Mitchell. I'm curious because you said that your model likes him a bunch. My model doesn't hate him. Where like he essentially what
mine does not like him at all. AD Mitchell.
Really?
Yeah.
So I've heard some people with models say that like they hate him. For me, it is kind of the you know, he was in a good offense. He is a young player heading into the draft, decent athleticism. But outside of that, it's like it's a lot of almost just like I'm at a spot, at least now, where I used to be much more arrogant, where I would just, like with Chris Olave, okay, like Matt Harmon, I get it, he's amazing, but like, okay, he runs pretty routes, like, but my numbers don't like him. Like, it's kind of the same thing with AD Mitchell, where like the film guys are telling me that this guy is like really, really good. And we're getting to a spot in the draft where like all of these are kind of sketchy profiles. Like even the good ones, you then have to like Xavier Worthy with second round draft capital is like a little bit shaky. So I'll take AD Mitchell here, but I'm curious kind of how you're wrestling with that.
Yeah, I think he's the pick here because of landing spot. And the other landing spot, like I have no idea what I'm going to do with the next pick, just because the landing spots really aren't that clean overall.
Oh yeah.
But I will say this about Mitchell. So I put this in a newsletter yesterday. But if you look at first round wide receivers with sub 60 breakout scores since 2011, which AD Mitchell's at 41.8 for his breakout score, so he's well below this mark of 60. But if you look at the first round wide receivers with sub 60 breakout scores since 2011, here's the list: Cordero Patterson, Tavon Austin, Kelvin Benjamin, Kevin White, Philip Dorsett, Josh Doxson, Henry Ruggs, Jalen Reagor, and Kadarius Toney. That's the list of sub 60 breakout scores in the first round since 2011. AD Mitchell has the worst best season yards per route run in this entire class this season of the guys who went to the NFL Combine. If he gets drafted in the first round, which he is in this case, and which I think he's going to go in the teens at this point, like the way that things are trending with Mitchell. But if and when he goes in the first round, since PFF started doing tracking and stuff and charting, he will have by far the lowest best season yards per route run rate. It's not even close, but the next lowest, the second lowest is Zay Flowers among first round wide receivers. AD Mitchell is like half a yard behind Zay Flowers in yards per route run. And look, yards per route run is not part of my model because I want to date it back a little bit further, and that data really isn't available. Going back to 2011 and so on. And I'm open to outliers existing. And here's the thing: AD Mitchell is hypothetically an outlier, if he goes in the first round, given this production profile, because we don't see many guys go in the first round with this production profile in the first place. So you could argue from that angle too. And he has a good teammate score, played at Georgia and then goes to Texas and plays with, really good talent and such. But at the end of the day, like, guys usually just produce. Like they usually are able to produce. And AD Mitchell did not have the production profile. I understand the ceiling's there, and I'll gladly label him as a high risk, highly volatile, high ceiling kind of player. But I often think that we get ceiling wrong when we're projecting things. Like we're fearful of like, we'll say Ladd McConkey is a floor guy. He's not a ceiling. We don't know that for sure. Yeah. Like, landing spot's going to dictate some of that. The play style itself, we just can't really nail down that accurately. To me, I just think AD Mitchell, and look, at this spot, given the other landing spots and given the fact that he went to Kansas City and they need an X and all of that, like, yes, I would take him here too. He's the obvious pick right here, but I don't think it's going to be as clean once rookie drafts, happen. And I have a feeling that I'm just going to be lower on Mitchell than the rest of the consensus.
I agree. Like Xavier Worthy could go anywhere in the first round, and I would prefer him to AD Mitchell on the Chiefs. And I think that you're probably in a similar boat.
Yeah, I think Xavier Worthy is really, really good.
Me too.
I guess I'm going to take him here as the next one. You can make the argument, I think, for like a Troy Franklin given landing spot in Jacksonville. I was contemplating that a little bit. Keon Coleman in LA is kind of interesting. You could even go Ladd in Carolina just to say, there's not that much. I mean, obviously Deontay is there now. I think that's kind of a redundant piece in some way because Deontay can get deep way more than people realize. But yeah, Xavier Worthy, I'll just go with him because I think he's really good. He's actually, 95 as a ZAP score is sort of a cutoff that I look at for elite prospects. And there's a very real chance if Worthy goes in round one that he's going to be above that mark, along with Brian Thomas and then the big three that we've been talking about. The biggest problem, two problems, is obviously size, which is not part of an input. It's not an input in the model, so it's not that big of a deal to me. And not only that, but if you look at guys who are sub 170 that have been drafted in the top 100 over the last 12 years or whatever, all of them are hits aside from Tutu Atwell, because you get Marquise Brown, Devontae Smith, Tank Dell, and Tutu Atwell. Maybe those are the only four. And then this would be the fifth, and Xavier Worthy. And Tutu Atwell was like, what are they doing? Like, we all knew that whenever they made that pick, a handful of years ago. But Xavier Worthy, his breakout score is really, really good, because as a freshman, he has this like 2.88 or something yards per team pass attempt rate. Like, it was really, really strong. And then, he doesn't get any better from a production standpoint after that. And that's a little scary to me, because they did add some competition, and what's that going to look like in the NFL then? But I do not think that he's like JJ Nelson or some just like really fast straight line speed kind of guy who can't really, like, I think he's a very nuanced receiver. And so since these landing spots in general at these wideouts are not very clean cut, I'll just go with Worthy and kind of move on.
Yeah, I don't mind that. This is where, like, I think I'm gonna have like a dynasty trade target kind of thing over the next couple of days, like a video I'll make. I know that it's just kind of the way that this draft falls, but like, I don't hate the idea. If you are like a championship contending team, I don't hate the idea of selling like your 111 or 112.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Because I think any way that this falls, and Leone actually put out really cool data that kind of looked at how like disproportionately like the early first is like super valuable and the late first has been kind of bad. And it's almost just like, it's kind of probably psychological. Like, the difference between like the 111 and the 201 in trade talks is actually like really wide, even though it really shouldn't be, just because, one has a one in front of the number. But you could talk me into Penix, first round quarterback. You could talk me into running backs, but then I have flashbacks to like Keyshawn Vaughn, and I'm like, I feel like I'm a mark if I take one of these running backs. But I think at the 112, the way that this fell, where like we were supposed to get like 7 first-round wide receivers. I'll be honest, man. All respect to Dane Brugler, a guy who broke the 40-yard dash record is not falling outside the first round. I'll plant that flag right now. But I'm gonna go Jaylen Wright. It doesn't feel right. I feel like it doesn't, like, I don't know that I would ever even want to be in a spot to have to make this pick in like an actual rookie draft. Yeah. I don't hate the rest of the options, but it does feel like, when we're talking about these guys, I think that they're going to come in, and Jaylen Wright will be a guy that at least like appreciates a little bit. I think that if he goes to the Cowboys, like, we could even see kind of his dynasty value pick up as like the redraft steam gets there in the summer. And that's like kind of interesting. Sure. Like, you could talk me into, because like I like Troy Franklin as well a ton, but you could talk me into the idea of like in the summer being able to trade him for Troy Franklin and like plus, so I don't hate it. I mean, when we talk about, I should probably say something about Jaylen Wright. I don't mind him, but he's weird. I don't know if you've seen, I know Hayden and Josh have talked about it a ton in terms of like light boxes with Tennessee. Like, their offense is just like very weird in terms of like he never faced like normal fronts. It was all like very light boxes. So his numbers are inflated, but he, to me, he comps like to Miles Sanders. They're both like 4.4 speed guys. I know Jaylen Wright ran a 4.38, but like 5'10", 210 pounds. Didn't catch like as many passes as you would like to, but elusive, some breakaway stuff in there. Like, I think he can be elusive. And then you put him in a Cowboys offense. One, you'll have hype before he even plays, and two, they don't really have anybody there. Well, it's like Rico Dowdle, and that's like it right now.
Yeah. Actually, one of the comps in my model with Jaylen Wright was DeMarco Murray, which obviously would fit the Dallas situation quite well. I think Murray, though, more capable of handling like a big workload. With Wright, though, like, he's at worst a good committee back, I think. Just given the speed and given what he can do there. And then at best, he just is able to carry a bigger workload than what we saw at Tennessee. And it's not like this would be the first time that a Tennessee running back, didn't have a big enough workload and then fell to the third round and then became a good fantasy asset, right? So yeah, I like the pick there with Jaylen Wright, given the landing spot.
Yeah, and I will say, before the show, I said this is going to be an hour. We only just finished the first round, but just stop me if we run into anything. But
no, we're good.
I think we'll be good. But all right, so 201. This will be, or hold on here. Let me actually. This is kind of dumb. I should have had it as not third round reversal. No, I need it to be linear. That's what I'm looking for. All right, so now you're back at the 201. Who do you got? I'm gonna go like we're operating. Not sorry, I shouldn't have stepped on you there, but like we're in the Wild West here. All right, so everybody that's watching, like, this is we're putting it all out there.
I'm gonna go Michael Penix here. I I don't think that he is near the same level as some of the other quarterbacks that we talked about, but I'm not drafting him at that level. You get a late first tag with him. I would assume he'd have like top 100 startup capital, as a result of that. And then, just given the stuff that I researched, more than likely he's going to be able to maintain that. And he, the situation in Vegas is not that bad from a personnel standpoint. And I think that he'd be able to take over at least, halfway through the season and get some reps in so that his value could potentially increase a little bit. So I'll go with Penix there and just kind of hold my nose.
Yeah, I don't mind that either. I don't love Penix as well. But I think you made a good point. And I'll be honest, I think I had a Sam Howell share or two, and I'm kicking myself for not selling him when he peaked at like QB 13 value on Keep Trade Cut. But that's kind of what you're looking for with Penix. I know that there's some guys out there that are truthers of him and think that he can be really, really good. I think where me and you are, he gets in there, he makes Davante Adams look good, and you sell him for like a late first or something in like 2026, and you kind of just ride off into the sunset there. So this next pick, just because I know who's in the room with me, I'm going to go Troy Franklin. You could have talked me into a couple different running backs. You could have talked me into a different receiver. But Troy Franklin, he goes to the Jaguars in this mock too, which is like pretty interesting. We ideally would like first round draft capital for Troy Franklin, but it feels like a pipe dream at this point. He goes to Jacksonville. He's somebody that I imagine your model probably likes a ton. I think every model likes Troy Franklin a good bit.
Yeah, he actually, I think my stuff compared to others doesn't like Franklin as much. And the main reason for that, I can pull him up. Like he, number one, he doesn't have any sort of like teammate score favorability, right? Just given the competition that he played with and such. So he doesn't get any sort of like bump from that. His breakout score is 89.5, which is pretty in line with like a Rome Odunze and such. But yeah, I mean, there's just not enough of like the secondary stuff, like teammate score that, or like his rushing production, wasn't really there. And his fantasy point score is decent, but there's just not enough of like that additional random, like situational stuff that favors him enough to like give him a strong enough boost. I just think he's in like right now with projected draft capital. I think I have him 39th overall with projected capital, and with Keon Coleman going 33rd overall, Coleman actually looks a little bit better in the model than Troy Franklin does.
Wow, I'm shocked. I actually like Keon Coleman a ton, who we'll talk about in a little bit here. But yeah, like Troy Franklin, so that makes sense. Like it doesn't. I'm in a similar boat. If you went first round, I think my model would like him a lot more. But like, he's somebody that gives me like almost like Marvin Mims vibes, where it's like,
yes, 100%
numbers, everything makes like but it's almost like a trap where it's like, if all the numbers were this good, why is he not a consensus first round pick? And that's kind of the red flag to me. His career yards per run is 2.63, which is really good. It's like literally more than Rome Odunze. He is really good numbers wise, but there's a reason that he's not a first round pick. He's also 176 pounds. I keep hearing from the film guys, I have an idea of what play strength means, but they keep saying he doesn't have that play strength. So he's getting bodied around, and he's not Devontae Smith, where he's getting picked in the top 10 despite being that size. So that's kind of the issue with him, is like he could almost be like kind of like I said it earlier, but like Alec Pierce is like the fear here, where you draft this guy and he's just like sexy, like field stretcher that doesn't do anything.
Yeah, he's got the comps for me were Jamison Williams, Paul Richardson, and Jalen Hyatt. For
Paul
Troy
Richardson.
Franklin. Yeah.
God damn.
There are some poor outs for Franklin.
Oh yeah. But he goes to the Jaguars. We get Trevor Lawrence there, and it's a little bit of a weird overlap with Gabe Davis in terms of like field stretching styles. But I'm curious, where are you going here at the 203?
I'll go. Okay, so I think that Jonathan Brooks is a better prospect than anyone else in the class at running back. My thing is more of a game theory perspective. With the ACL, I fear that he's not going to necessarily get a ton of work year one. And then he lands in Carolina, which is a spot where they probably don't need him to get a lot of work in year one. And then I would worry about what his value would look like after year one. Whereas Trey Benson going to the Giants probably steps in, can overtake a guy like Devin Singletary and see a decent amount of work. So I'll go Benson here. I think there's a lot of flags to Benson's profile, actually. I know that a lot of people are high on him, and I understand it. Like he has He definitely has the athletic profile to be a hit. Like in 3 years, I'm not gonna be surprised if we look back and Trey Benson is the best running back in this class. That won't surprise me. But since 2011, this is from my newsletter also, but since 2011, we've had 71 running backs get picked between pick 33 and 100, so day 2 picks. Of those 71, 9 of them had a breakout score below 60 and a best season reception share below 10%. Those 9 backs were Alex Green, Stephen Ridley, Christine Michael, Carlos Hyde, Matt Jones, Damian Harris, Trey Sermon, Ty Davis Price, and Kendre Miller. And Trey Benson falls in that bucket, unfortunately. So I think that there's at least narratives you can tell yourself about Benson because of the early ACL that he suffered in college. And he has really good, missed tackles forced numbers and obviously the speed scores there. That's why I'm okay with taking him here. And I think that of the remaining landing spots and of the remaining running backs that are there, he has the best chance in New York to sort of see his value rise just based on production and his fantasy points scored.
Yeah, exactly. Like he'll be the RB1 in this scenario. What they get Nabers, they get Benson. Like you're hoping that Daniel Jones is like good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Like I like Benson too, but like it's not. He's kind of just like propped up in like a weak running back class. The Giants are like a fine spot for him. I couldn't even really tell you. Oh, Devin Singletary's in that backfield, so that's like it's not wide open, I guess, but it's pretty open there. And I'll take at this next pick, 204. I'm making sure I'm not like I feel like I'm gonna miss something that's just like, oh, like that was an obvious pick. But I think I'm gonna go Keon Coleman. I was expecting you to snipe me on him, but I'm glad. You know what, man? I'm glad that you like Keon Coleman as well, because I keep on having to be the guy. Like when I was on ship chasing, like I was the guy that had to raise my hand and be like, I like Keon Coleman. So I'm curious, like where does he pop for you? Because he doesn't have I don't think that he has a single season over 1,000 receiving yards, and also his RAS came out really good. But I know that's not an input for you, so I'm curious. I imagine it's like kind of early breakout and some other things.
Yeah, I wouldn't say that I would say that I like him depending on how people who are looking at analytics are viewing Coleman, because I think a lot of them just automatically hate him, right? Or just are not into him, which I can understand. I mean, I'm looking at his stuff in the model right now. He has a 55.7 breakout score, which is not good at all. He has a poor fantasy point score. But going back to teammate score, you have Johnny Wilson, who could be a day 2 pick. And then you have Jayden Reed last year, who he had played with, and he outproduced Jayden Reed. And so that's the kind of context that boosts these sort of middling profiles up a little bit. And I think that there's just a lot the statistical comps for Keon Coleman are Brashad Perriman, Kevin White, and Cortland Sutton. So they're not that strong, right? I'm not selling this. If you read the prospect guide, it doesn't say very good things about Keon Coleman, but I liked what I had Matt Harmon on the podcast, and I liked what he was saying, where he could see him being sort of a big slot somewhere and being I've seen other people talk about him going to Denver or something and being like Marquise Colston for Sean Payton, right? And being sort of that big slot. If that's the direction it goes in, landing spot could go a really long way for a guy like Coleman. I don't know how LA would necessarily deploy him, because it depends on how they handle this draft in general. But, given their personnel right now, you could hypothetically throw him and make him a big slot too. But I think that's the best outcome for a guy like Coleman.
Yeah, it's tough because it kind of depends on the way that a team deploys him. But I like the idea of kind of like you said, Marquise Colston. I like the idea of prime Juju, when Juju was Juju. Yeah. And I know you're a Steelers fan, when he was really good. And he was also one of these guys where he played big slot, but I know he had that 90 something yard touchdown, but he wasn't crazy fast or anything. I'm trying to pull up Keon Coleman, but he's interesting because he people just threw him down their draft board because he ran a 4.6 at the combine, but he still ends up as I think he has an 8.18 RAS, which isn't bad because he has a 38-inch vertical. He has the size, 4'6", 140. He's someone else where we talk about being dynamic. He didn't take a lot of rush attempts, but he did have 25 punt returns in his final year on a team on Florida State that, recruits well and has all this talent. And then he also played basketball his freshman year at Michigan State, which is that's something that I like as well. Even it's kind of, to me, he's a poor man's Drake London, as a guy who doesn't separate. His contested catch numbers are high, which are a little bit concerning, but the early breakout, basketball background, crazy like vertical juice. They're using him everywhere. So I really like it because to me, he has a really high upside profile that in the past when we were chasing these like big body receivers, I know like the Rotoviz era with like Josh Gordon and stuff, these used to be guys people would drool over. We're now getting this massive discount because everyone's like looking into the contested catch stuff and the separation. And I have no, like he goes to the Chargers and I can get him at 204. I'll take that all day.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the difference is that like, you don't have to, like, if you're going to using a mid-second on Keon Coleman, that's perfect. Like you're not, the risk is sort of baked in to that kind of capital.
Now you're up here at the 205. What do you got?
I will go with, you know what? I'm going to go with Jonathan Brooks.
I like it.
I was thinking about another wideout, but I'll go with Brooks. I think he has the most complete profile in the class, 3-down back skill set. If the ACL recovery is faster than expected, or if he feels good, he could find the field, quicker, sooner rather than later. Hopefully by like October, he's more closer to 100%. And in Carolina, it's a depth chart that he can definitely climb. I mean, he would immediately be the best and most talented running back there. I don't know if he ends up going to Carolina. Carolina doesn't feel like the spot for Jonathan Brooks, but yeah, I mean, I think he's the most complete back in this class. Good teammate score, especially because played with Bijan and Roshan last year. Overall, he definitely checks a lot of boxes.
Yeah, he's so tough for me, Jonathan Brooks. He goes round 3 here to the Panthers. And from like a game theory perspective, he's so tough because when I have running backs in Dynasty, I want to be competing. But if he's off of an ACL and not going to be that good in year 1, then he's more of a rebuilding piece. But if I'm rebuilding, I would either rather take a receiver or just trade this second for a future second and just, push that points forward. But the issue I have is I've also seen the other side of the token where we talked about with the quarterbacks of kind of like how they retain value. And with Jonathan Brooks, it's interesting because we've seen before like Jameson Williams, where like if you come in with like a legit ACL tear, it seems like you almost get a mulligan in year 1, where like he would almost like hold his value no matter what, if that makes sense. Because like he would just have the excuse baked in. Hey, torn ACL, like it is what it is. So it's like it's very hard to wrestle with because I agree. I think he's the best prospect, but he's also coming off an ACL, and it's like I don't really know a scenario where I would feel great pressing the button on him, but I do get the side of like maybe the market would have some forgiveness,
Yeah, for sure.
Now, this 206 spot, we are starting to get a little bit thin here. I am going to go with, I'll go Ladd McConkey. Fine. This is, to be honest, like this is, me and you, we're definitely more numbers oriented. I think a lot of I don't know if they're going to be commenters or who's going to be sort of screaming at the screen here. But I think people would have probably taken, like, if this is the way the draft went in real life, I think Ladd McConkey in rookie drafts probably goes like 201, like 1-2 turn area. And I get it. Like the thing is, his yards per out run is really good. His 2.54 career yards per out run is like really good. It's actually more career yards per out run than Rome Odunze. It's just like, it's tough, man. We're talking about a guy that like never really broke out. I don't know what his ceiling is, but you do make a good point of like, we're bad at projecting ceiling. We saw, the white guy, Cooper Kupp, have one of the craziest seasons ever. Michael Thomas, like a boring slant guy, have a really, really good season. So it's like, who am I to like say that this guy can't be great at one point in time? But like, also if he's just like, I don't know, if he's just like sexy Jacoby Myers, like it wouldn't like shock me a ton. I'm curious, how are you kind of, managing the Ladd McConkey thing?
I've started to like him more and more as the process has gone on. He has a good teammate score because of obviously playing at Georgia. And I think that this is just one of those cases where, his yards per out run's really good. His yards per team pass attempt is really bad. And it's very strange because his breakout score then as a result of that is not that, here it is, is not that strong. He has a breakout score of 42.9, which is not, it's below average. But, this is not unlike sort of what we saw with Puka Nacua last year, where you have this very large difference because yards per team pass attempt and yards per out run correlate very strongly to one another, right? And when there's a big gap like this, you got to ask why. And actually, Ladd McConkey, of all relevant players in my database, has the largest discrepancy between best season yards per out run and best season yards per team pass attempt. You have to ask why. And the very simple reason why is he was 5th on Georgia last year in routes run. And the reason for that is likely twofold. It's probably a little bit injury related because he wasn't 100% throughout the year, but also Georgia game scripts are pretty favorable. And so they're not going to throw McConkey out on the field whenever games just don't matter that much. So, given the context and, even right now, he has 36 draft capital, according to NFL mock draft database. That's at least the most recent update that I put in here. And he has a score of 88.5, a ZAP model score, which is, again, in that cluster with like Troy Franklin and Keon Coleman. So I think he's right there. And given, this is looking at him in almost the worst way analytically, if you will, because it's looking at yards per team pass attempt, I'm okay with then subjectively bumping him up a little bit. I think right now in my ranking, in my dynasty rankings, he's like my wide receiver 6 in this rookie class.
Yeah, that's like I'm sort of conforming with the public. I have a hard time. Like for me, the decision point is like you said, this cluster of like Franklin, Coleman, Ladd McConkey. I find myself siding with Coleman and Franklin over him as I take both here ahead of him. But it's like I agree. I get it. He's someone that we could just look up in a year and be like, man, I should have just gave him a pass. Because there's some film grinders out there on Twitter that have him as high as like wide receiver 4, that they just like really like him that much. And I do get it. I think honestly, like kind of best case scenario, if you're not a guy that's like high on McConkey, is he goes 32 to the Chiefs and then he's just in a spot where you could like never fathom actually having to press the button on him,
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
So you are up here at the 207. What do you got? I will say we're starting to get thin on the day 1 and 2 guys. We have the round 4, 5, 6, 7 guys. I'm curious where you're going here.
I don't love this landing spot. People have been hyping up this landing spot for an outside receiver, and I don't really get it. I'm going to go with Ricky Pearsall here,
okay.
but I don't love the indie landing spot like others do. I mean, like, look, Anthony Richardson got him in a lot of dynasty leagues. Hope he balls out. I think he's a good quarterback, all that. Done so much research though on mobile quarterbacks. It's just not a good thing for pass catchers in their offenses. And I'm a really big fan of Josh Downs too. Like I think Josh Downs is a really, really, really good slot receiver. Like I think Josh Downs is almost an arbitrage right now on Jackson Smith and Jigba from last year's class, just from a cost perspective. So I love Josh Downs. Michael Pittman's great, obviously. And so you're competing with 2 very, very good players. And then you have what will likely be skewed towards a more run heavy offense with Anthony Richardson and Jonathan Taylor back there. And so I don't know what the volume ceiling really looks like for Pearsall. But I like Pearsall a lot as a talent. I know he's a 5-year guy, but he does have that versatile profile that we were talking about earlier. He analytically looks a lot like Jayden Reed in my model, because you get sort of the rushing production from him. He did stuff on special teams. He can play inside, outside, kind of be thrown all over the field. The difference is that Reed is a little bit thicker from like a BMI standpoint, a little bit more of like Jayden Reed has more of like a Debo in him than Ricky Pearsall does. But Pearsall is just a very, very good route runner. I wish this wasn't the landing spot, but I think he's by far the most talented player that's sort of left out here that we haven't drafted.
Yeah, he's a tough one because, like you said, your model likes him a decent bit, but there are some film guys. Like I want to say Hayden might have him like wide receiver 6 or wide receiver 7. And some people love Ricky Pearsall, and I can definitely see it. Like you said with the rushing, like 21 rush attempts, 253 yards, and 5 rushing touchdowns for Ricky Pearsall is great. He's also athleticism doesn't matter like a ton, but like when we're talking about a guy like Ricky Pearsall, where we start saying like Julian Edelman and Wes Welker and Danny Amendola as comps for him. Like he had a 4.4 40, 42-inch vertical, elite agility testing as well. Like he is an athleticism monster. So I kind of like it too, but I agree that is a little bit of a weird spot there with the Colts because Anthony Richardson's going to run a ton. And not to put you on the spot, I was curious. I know you do the draft capital delta. Something that I found is it was egregious that Josh Downs was a third round pick last year. Was he someone that popped there? Is that usually because I know you've used it for guys like Diggs before? Is it just a day 3 thing, or did he pop at all, Josh Downs?
No, it's an every round thing. And and this year, instead of so draft capital delta is just me looking at a player's prospect score and then equating draft capital to a percentile and essentially subtracting the two, because the score is on like a 0 to 100 scale. So I can just look at percentile for draft capital and kind of go from there. So if a player has a draft capital that's a percentile that's greater than their prospect score, that means they were overdrafted, essentially, is what the model's saying. Whereas if the inverse is true, then they were underdrafted. So this year, instead of giving people like the raw number of like what that delta is, because, you know, getting mathy about it, like the delta is going to be greater when you get into the late rounds of the draft because draft capital matters less, essentially. So instead of like giving the raw number for draft capital delta, I'm just profiling these guys as neutral, low risk, or high risk. And so someone like Brian Thomas, for instance, it's going to be a little bit confusing. I'm going to have to like spell it out a little bit whenever I do the update to the guide. But someone like Brian Thomas is actually a low risk receiver, even though I think we'd consider him more of like a higher risk guy. But assuming he goes in the teens or whatever, it'll label him as a low risk guy because his profile is a lot better than where that draft capital is, right? Josh Downs was an absolute low risk guy. Yes. Yeah. Like his profile all around was fantastic. And I think he was good. Like I've called him a buy throughout the offseason. You know, I'm definitely nervous and worried, and I think they're going to get a wide receiver day 1, day 2. And that's a little bit scary, but it's one of those things where like you can wait till after the draft. And I've said that too. Like I'm trying to buy talent, accumulate talent. I think that Josh Downs is a really talented slot guy.
Yeah, I agree. He was someone that like he was it was mind-boggling that he went 3rd round. To me, I thought that he was pretty much a lock to go 2nd round. He looks a lot. I know that he's not good anymore. He was great on my Jets, Elijah Moore, but like they looked very similar as like very clean slot, undersized guys. So yeah, I love Josh Downs a ton. So I'm up here. I'm gonna go with kind of the boomer pick. I'm gonna go Blake Corum. He goes to the Chargers. He reunites with Harbaugh. I know that they just signed Dobbins. They brought in Gus Edwards. They're like building like Ravens West over there. But I just, I don't know if you pair him with his old coach. I actually like Blake Corum a decent bit, where his like efficiency numbers weren't good, but he came off of this like knee injury that was like a meniscus injury that he had, and even off of that injury, he still had like maybe like the most productive running back season for like a Michigan running back, where he had 28 total touchdowns, like 1,200 plus yards. He was like in college football, he was just a monster. He like iced the game versus Alabama in the college football playoffs. Like I like him. He has a season 2 as a sophomore. He had 24 catches, which is pretty interesting. So I don't know. I mean, he's gonna be 24 on day 1. So this is never gonna be a guy that like gives you startup value. But if you're a contender, he can be a guy that you can start, you know, in his first year and like give you meaningful production.
Yeah, that's what I feel like with my next pick. I'm gonna go with Marshawn Lloyd. Because he landed in Arizona. And I think that there's a shot that, you know, we could see him then take over year 2. You know, he's older. He's past 23 right now. And I actually do think they're like, again, this is another guy, like some people have him as the RB1 in this class, Lloyd. I think there are some red flags with his analytical profile, at least. I have this in the prospect guide, but since 2011, we've had 27 drafted running backs enter the league past the age of 23 with breakout score below 40. And Lloyd has a score of only 31. So his breakout score is not very strong. Only 3 of those 27 running backs had double-digit PPR point per game seasons during their first 3 years in the league. And those players were Andre Ellington, Latavius Murray, and Buck Allen. So we're not looking at players who like consistently got it done, right? Robert Turbin's my top comp for him. So I think there's because he's very athletic. Like that's not in question at all with Marshawn Lloyd. I just question how good he is as a runner, as a running back. And so, and a receiver even. But I will take a chance here at this spot because the rest of the 2nd and 3rd round wide receivers, the landing spots are meh. The prospects themselves are kind of meh as well. Unless I'm missing someone, but, so I'm just going to go with the landing spot and hope that things kind of shake out and work out for Lloyd.
Yeah, I don't mind that. I like Marshawn Lloyd too. It seems like the film guys like him, that he has like all this juice and stuff, but I agree. Like it's a weird profile to wrestle with. He goes to Arizona though, like James Conner's old, misses games all the time. So I definitely see the appeal. They get Marvin Harrison Jr. There's some hype there. But this one is tough too. I'm gonna go Roman Wilson. He's like he goes 2nd round here. I'll take him. Matt Hart, like I know you just had him on. He scared the shit out of me when it comes to Roman Wilson. He has like sub 20 percentile across the board, but his career yards per run of 2.33 is amazing. He's scary where he 60% of his slot of his routes are from the slot, and he has a 14.1 yard ADOT. So he has some like Jalen Hyatt to him as like this like downfield slot guy that you don't really love. But I also feel like Michigan's offense was very much putting him in that spot where like they would almost not pass the ball until they were in like 3rd and long situations or like had to pass it. So it's a little bit weird there, but yeah, like he's someone that has like a decent production profile. He's going to be someone that, you know, he was on Michigan, a good team. I don't really think his teammate score is that great, but he was competing with a guy who'll be a tight end you'll know next year, Colston Loveland, who was really good. So I don't know. I don't mind Roman Wilson. He also has that dynamic stuff where I think he took some rush attempts and kick returns. So
Yes.
I don't mind him. And he's on the Steelers. I'm kind of optimistic on what Russell Wilson / Justin Fields can do there. So I'll take him.
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go stick in the same division. I'll just go with Legette with the next pick. Again, I don't love the landing spot in Baltimore. We don't see high volume out of their receivers. You know, even last season with them not having Greg Roman anymore. But Legette, again, I'll just talk about breakout score a little bit. Like he's sub 80, but I think he had a 79.5 breakout score, which is really not that bad. And it's all because of his numbers this past year just being out of control. And if you look at day 2 wide receivers since 2011 who had who were like older in age, like over 23, but had good breakout scores, which basically tells you that like they didn't have just like amazing age adjusted production necessarily because they didn't come out early, but they were able to give you a couple good seasons or a big season, what have you. You get some hits, like you get like Jayden Reed, Deebo Samuel, Calvin Ridley was one just because he came out so late. So you know, there are definitely hits to this profile to some degree. Now, am I going to bank on that in the early second, even mid? Like I think late second is like the earliest, and I'm going to feel really comfortable with Legette. And you know, I have a feeling that he could go to a better landing spot, and people are going to juice him up a little bit more than this. So, you know, this is the last pick in the second round. I think I'll gladly, or maybe second to last pick, but I'll gladly take that risk and jump with Legette here.
Yeah, I like that call as well where, you know, if he hits in a big way and you're getting him late. I know like a lot of the film guys love him. I could definitely see him being really good. And I think like Josh Norris made a point too where his best season wasn't like Mingo's. Like Mingo is definitely his like a comp for him, but like Mingo, I think his best season was like 900 yards, but Xavier Legette had like a monstrous year where it was like 1,200 plus, like 3.2 yards per out run. And I'm going to kind of still... I was looking through your prospect guide. I think this is someone that you really like, and it pains me to take him from you, JJ. I'm going to take Braelon Allen. I don't know how. I don't know if you were looking at him, but he goes to the Raiders. And he's somebody where I imagine your model likes him a ton. Mine does too, because, you know, he's like freaking 16 years old or whatever he is. He's rocked up. And I hate to say it, but if he somehow went day 2 and then ran a 40 like anywhere under 4.6, he would be like disgusting. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yes.
So
100%.
I don't mind him here. He's on the Raiders. You know, Zamir White, I don't really care. Who they bring in, Alexander Madison, don't really care. Like that, it's a wide open backfield. They get Penix. I guess we could kind of sell ourselves on that. So I do like this would kind of be one of the better landing spots / draft capital for Braelon Allen, who didn't test.
Yeah, I just completely forgot about the day 3 guys. So I would have taken Allen probably. We can pretend that I ended up doing that. But yeah, that's a good pick with Allen. Like I think that he's like I got him in a rookie mock right now that I'm doing in the mid 3rd, Allen. And so like he's falling in drafts because projected draft capital, all that good stuff. But I think there's enough to his profile to be excited about. There's a lot of stuff that suggests that he doesn't use his size properly. Like he's not great or as good as he should be at like breaking tackles. Maybe we're looking at an AJ Dillon situation. But his age adjusted profile, the dude's playing Wisconsin ball as a running back as a 17-year-old freshman who, by the way, was recruited as like a safety linebacker kind of hybrid. Like the dude is just an athletic freak. So, you know, I think at that point in the draft, 100% worth, you know, going for.
Yeah, 100%. He's someone like I said, like if he read anything under like a 4.6 and he went day 2, like he would be someone that you could talk me into as like RB1 in this class. But we're in the 3rd round. We'll do like a little bit of rapid fire here. We'll get some pacing in. What do you got at 301 here?
I'm gonna go with Jatavian Sanders since it's the tight end premium. You know, I actually don't. I like the tight end model has Brock Bowers as by far the best tight end in the class, and then there's 3 guys in the 80s, in the 80 range for the Zap scores. with projected capital, and that's Jaheim Bell, who the model likes a lot. And then there's Theo Johnson because of his athleticism, but I think there are a lot of red flags to his profile. And then Jatavian Sanders, who I think is sort of like the safest option of the three, but maybe doesn't have like an amazing ceiling because the athleticism isn't like as strong as we wanted it to be at the combine. But going to Miami, second round capital, I'll take that all day.
Yeah, 100%. Like if McDaniel spends the draft capital on a tight end, I think that they'll use him as much as like I think some people will be like, oh, well, he doesn't use tight ends. Well, he had I can't remember the guy's name from last year. So this next pick for me, I am tempted to sort of like this sort of seems like round 4 running back territory. So I think I'm gonna go. I'm gonna go Will Shipley. He goes to Houston here. I really like Will Shipley. He kind of pops numbers wise just because of like the versatility. He tested well, you know, and he goes to Houston. They're going to have Stroud. Their offense is going to be sick. I'm not a big Mixon believer. Damian Pierce is just a complete non-factor there. So like, you know, I think this is the part of the draft you can start taking day 3 running back. So why not Will Shipley?
Yeah, I like that. I'm going to go with a day 3 wide receiver. I'm going to go with Javon Baker because he went to Buffalo in this mock. I think there's a couple third round wide receivers in the mock that you could have gone there, or at least one that I like, but there's some risk. But Javon Baker going to Buffalo, if Brian Thomas is his number 1 competition, I think that Baker could end up look, I'm a Shakir truther like through and through. I love Khalil Shakir, loved him coming out. But Baker, you know, has a little bit of intrigue to his profile. He did really well his final 2 seasons at UCF after transferring from Alabama. So I'll go with him in Buffalo, even though he went round 4.
Yeah, I don't hate that at all. Javon Baker's been a guy that I like a ton. Round 4 draft capital would be like a pretty big bummer.
Yeah, agreed.
Let's see. I almost, you know what's crazy, man? I like this is kind of out of character for me. I think I'm gonna go Spencer Rattler. As crazy as that is, I mean, this is the Broncos. They don't take a quarterback through the first 2 rounds. But they have like Jared. I don't even know that they have Jared Stidham on the roster. Like, I don't know. I think they have Jared Stidham, but like, if it's just Spencer Rattler, I'm fine with it. I can't really make a numbers based argument on why Spencer Rattler is good. It's really just that he was a 5-star recruit, good freshman year, and then everything else after that sucks. But like, scouts say that he has arm talent and like he stands in the pocket and does good things that quarterbacks do. So I'll take their word on it and hope that, you know, he'll start some games, and similar to Penix, where there'll be a spot where you can sell him at some point.
I'm between 2 guys for the next one. I'll go with Ja'Lynn Polk. I think he's safer versus the other one, but he's in Detroit. I think hypothetically he could just be better than Jameson Williams from what we've seen from Williams. So, you know, with Polk in Detroit, he could be a starter almost immediately if things work out in his favor. And in the 3rd round, why not take that shot?
Yeah, I like that too. Polk has been someone that's like weird for me. I like Jalen McMillan more, but here,
Me too.
you know, he gets the draft capital, so why not at that point? Man. All right, so now we're in the deep end here. Let me go with I'm gonna take another running. I keep taking running backs, but I like I'm gonna go Audric Estime here. Jersey boy, Notre Dame. He tested horribly, but like he has decent GPS times, and his breakaway run percentage is pretty good. He goes to Tampa Bay here, where like Rachaad White I think he had like a top 3 most rush attempts in the NFL while being like an under 4-yard per carry guy. So it wouldn't shock me if Estime could carve out like a goal line and like almost like a Gus Edwards kind of role. So I don't mind that on an offense that like was decent last year. So I'll take Estime there.
I'm going to go with Jermaine Burton next. I think that he is a very, very talented and good wide receiver. He, as a sophomore at Georgia, before he transferred to Alabama, he was 2nd on that team in receiving behind only Brock Bowers. And that's that team that we talked about earlier that had all that talent. There's just a lot of off the field stuff with Burton, and that's the big risk with him.
Yeah, I've heard that too. I almost was like kind of scared off the Rams landing spot, but I actually now that I think about it, like you're gonna have one of Kupp or Puka inside, and then like you're just competing with DeMarcus Robinson in like 3 wide receiver sets. So that's actually a steal. Let me go with this next pick here. You know what? Like we're kind of disrespecting him here. We'll go. We talked about him early on. I'll go Malachi Corley and just take the round 3 wide receiver. I'm not a Malachi Corley guy. I know some guys love him. Like some people say the tape is great. Some people can say that he's like next Debo. Every time we say he's next Debo, he's just not. So I'll take him at like 308. You can do worse than like a guy with a 3rd round draft capital wide receiver.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to go with the next one. Let's go with, let's go with Devontez Walker, I guess, in Atlanta. That. Just see if he can, he's a burner. I'm actually lower on Walker than a lot of analytics folks. I've seen some that are like confidently getting him in round 2 of rookie drafts. But I just, the profile to me doesn't scream stud. I think he's more of like I don't want to say one trick pony because that's not fair, but I think he's more of like we saw De'Ami Brown come out of UNC with a similar skill set. I could see that happening with Walker. I think there's just some risk with this profile, but I'll take him in the 3rd going to Atlanta on a team where he could climb that depth chart. He could be a starter hypothetically right away if things broke his way.
Yeah, I agree. I'm in the same boat. Like Devontez Walker doesn't really move me a ton. If we want to give out the Alec Pierce comp, he's someone that actually looks like that, where he's just like a downfield guy. With this pick, though, I think this is one that we both kind of slept on. But Bucky Irving goes to the Chiefs here. Chiefs running back, they have like literally just Pacheco. Maybe Bucky Irving can kind of be that Jerick McKinnon role for them. And we saw 2022 down the stretch, McKinnon was just a monster. So I'll take Irving. His like production is great. It's just that he's not athletic.
I'm going to go with Malik Washington next with the Jets. Obviously they could use some wideout help. I think the downside with this in this particular mock is that Brock Bowers went there. So you're going to occupy a similar space on the field because Malik is a bruising slot receiver. I mean, he's a beast. So I like Washington. Really, really good final season. Had some weird quarterback play at Northwestern when he was there. But yeah, I mean, I'll take him at the beginning of round 4 to the Jets. I think that makes sense.
Yeah, I like that. If you want to talk about Jets guys, sure. I actually wouldn't hate that. We come out with Bowers and Malik Washington. I mean, look out. All right. So this last guy that I'll take, the final pick, I'll go Bo Nix. He goes round 2 to the Rams. It's probably similar to, I know you have some scars from the Hendon Hooker pick in our rookie mock. Man. That's like Bo Nix. I like him a ton, but if he goes 52nd, he's going to sit behind Stafford. It's just like, like Hendon Hooker's like almost cuttable at this point. Not anything that he's done. It's just like at what point does he like do anything? So that would be sort of the gripe here as he goes to the Rams. Now, that is a full 3-round mock draft of JJ Zachariason. We fit it all in. I appreciate you making time for me, JJ. I know you have a ton going on with the draft, the rookie guide, everything. Let the people know where they can find you, what you got going on, what you have plans to drop over these next few weeks.
Yeah, so next week is the draft. Saturday, the draft ends. And once the draft ends, give me a couple hours to really finalize things. I'll get the updated prospect guide out. If you want the prospect guide, check it out. It's only $14.99 over on lateround.com. It's 130 plus pages of like really nerdy analytical content if you're into that kind of thing. But yeah, all my stuff then over on lateround.com. You get the podcast draft guide then will be out, pre-orders in May, which I'm excited for. Where it's really like a strategy focused piece as opposed to just like, here's rankings and kind of go from there. So yeah, it's a busy time of year, even though the NFL isn't as busy.
Yeah. I don't know how you do it. We'll make sure we have all of that in the description, in the comments. Like making one draft guide is pretty daunting to me. The fact that you do 2 and it's like really well, like the fact, like this is how simple I am. I struggle to even get a website together. You have a PDF where you can click, like, you know what I mean? Like you can click on the running back part and it like brings you to the running back part. Yeah. And it's like a whole interactive thing. So it's really good. If any of you guys out there, I know we all have rookie drafts coming up. Make sure you check it out. Again, thank you so much to JJ for coming on. If you're out there and you're watching, leave a like, subscribe. We're going to have draft content coming out the rest of this draft cycle, the rest of this, springtime that we have all of this prospect talk. But I appreciate you guys watching, and I will see you guys in the next one.
Stones, like this froze, ice cold.